With today's forum for the People's Floyd Commission, and Michelle Gross of Communities United Against Police Brutality is going to open it up for us.
Welcome, everybody. Hi. Okay, this is audience participation tonight. So we're going to start with that again. We're going to say, welcome, everybody. Hi. There you go. That's better, because this is all about you folks and your audience participation tonight. We're going to start off, you know that this is the first of a series of 5 hearings where we're going to start off with a little bit different topic every night. We'll kind of do a short introduction, and then after we've done our short introduction, we're going to go right into hearing your testimonies. And we hope that you will step up and give us information, because the goal of this series of activities is to eventually actually put together a report with your recommendations and things like that, take it to the city, try to get them to move forward. The genesis of this event, just a real quick thing, the genesis of this event was that the city, we are 3 months out, more than 3 months out from the killing of George Floyd. And yet, there has been no effort by the city to really hear what people have to say. They are still talking at City Hall about making a community engagement plan. That means, let's figure out how we can limit the scope of the conversation, tell everybody that gets 2 minutes to speak, right? And this kind of stuff, and really clamp down on the conversation, because I think in a way they're afraid. And we need to be open to everybody's opinions, everybody's ideas. We need to hear what people have to say. And our goal at the end of this, like I said, is to hear all that information, compile it into a report that can then be turned into actions so that we do not have another one of these incidents again. And so, community, just a tiny thing about us, Communities United Against Police Brutality is an all-volunteer organization. We're in our 20th year. We love everybody that wants to be involved, to get involved, because again, we're all volunteer organization. And so we've got lots of information about our organization back there. We have information about, the killing of George Floyd and a lot of the conditions that led to that killing. Our goal tonight is to explore some of that, but if you bring up other topics, that's fine too. We will ask you to be a little bit, aware of other people. We're not going to do any of this, you get 2 minutes and cut you off thing, or any of that foolishness that they always do at the city. But we do ask that you just be a little cognizant of other people and make, be a little aware of that. A little bit of housekeeping. We have food in the kitchen if you're hungry. We told you to come hungry. And we've got great food for you in the kitchen provided by our friends with Sisters Camelot, for which we thank them deeply for that. And restrooms rather are out in the hallway here and to the right. And there's 2 of them, so feel free to get up and move as you need to. We also have beverages for you in the kitchen and all of that as well. So we'll ask just maybe a few people at a time to go in the kitchen, go in that door here and come out this other door over here and rejoin us. So that you're, again, all safety and stuff like that. Fair enough? Okay. So I would like to introduce you tonight to the speakers that are going to be speaking, just to get us started. And to my right here is Todd Schuman. And Todd is with Justice for Justine, Damon Ruchik. And his organization did a lot of work for Justice for Justine, but not just for Justice for Justine. They were clear from the outcome, from the start, that being involved with Justice for Justine also meant seeking justice for all stolen lives. They've been very clear about that from the very beginning. And so that's, that particular case did get some measure of justice. But now they're continuing to do the work to get justice for all of the other cases. And so Todd will speak first, and then this is Christoph, and Christoph is going to be speaking a little bit about some of the other kinds of issues that have come out of this whole matter, and what led us to this point of George Floyd being killed, and he represents Communities United Against Police Brutality. So, and with that, I'm going to turn this over to Tucson.
Great. My name is Tucson Morrison. I'm with On-Site Public Media, and I will be moderating the forum today with people that want to speak. Really going into this, just assume that there are no hard answers here, and this is going to generate a lot of questions. This is based off of what I know in speaking with Michelle, the Christopher Commission after the Rodney King beating. Los Angeles put into act the Christopher Commission, where they vetted the entire LAPD. That has not happened here in Minneapolis. There's maybe been some moves. There's been a charter commission. There's been, in my opinion, my background in media, you're always asked to be objective. I'm not necessarily in that anymore, but in my opinion, the moves have been somewhat lukewarm, and that's why we're here today to talk. That's why we're here today to talk and hear from you. So that being said, we're going to start with Todd and then go to Christoph and move from there. And then if you want to speak, we'll start off with people that did file a complaint about the police, and just step to the microphone up here, tell us what happened. If you don't want to be filmed, let us know, and we'll edit that out. But let's start with Todd. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, and I want to thank Michelle and Tucson for inviting us here tonight. We're really excited about this series of hearings, and we think there's a lot of good that's going to come out of that. My name is Todd Schuman. I'm with a group, like Michelle said, we're calling ourselves these days Justine's Neighbors for Justice. And I was asked to speak today about the culture and the environment that contributed to George Floyd's death, especially the wake of the Justine Damon trial. I want to preface my remarks right from the start that my perspective on police violence is based on an incredibly rare event, and that is the indictment, prosecution, and conviction of a police officer. I'm keenly aware that this verdict came about in no small part due to the race, the gender, and the class of both the officer and the victim, and that hundreds of Minnesotans have died at the hands of police over the last 20 years. And I've never seen coverage from the media or prosecution by the county attorney's office with anywhere near the kind of zealotry that they did when an officer was white or the victim was black. So we continue to stand in support of all families of victims of police violence, and we're steadfast in our efforts to make sure that the officials reopen the investigations in these cases, and get these families the same measure of justice that Justine received. So during Officer Knorr's trial, the corruption and the incompetence of the Minneapolis Police Department, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and the Police Federation were on full display. We heard how after the shooting, the officers immediately began concocting false narratives to justify her death, that she was on drugs, or that she had slapped the car, spooking the officers. We learned about the sloppy field work that the BCA did. They interviewed a total of 2 witnesses in the 5 months after that investigation. And they also allowed the squad car that Officers Knorr and Hardy drove to get washed and put back into service within hours of the event happening, which lost an enormous amount of evidence that could have jeopardized that entire case. The Police Federation stonewalled the county attorney's efforts to investigate the case, and they had to be compelled by subpoena in order to provide statements. The officers who did give testimony during the trial had conflicting statements with other evidence that was presented during the trial. For those who have followed police killings like this before, this didn't come as a surprise to any of us. Like, these are the same kind of behaviors that we've seen time and time again. What was different this time is that there was actually a trial in Justine's death. And so the public finally got to see in clear daylight how the police conspired to avoid accountability in every civilian death. And so as a result, we saw a lot of cries of outrage and calls for reform that came right after that verdict came through. Governor Walz announced that he wanted to audit the BCA, their policies and procedures, and find out what went wrong in their investigation. Mayor Fry and Chief Arredondo asserted that they would take a wrecking ball to the blue wall of silence and that there was no room for liars within the police department. And then Judge Quaintance, the judge who presided over the case, he felt compelled to echo the public statements when she made this statement at the sentencing hearing. Quote, "The primary concern of the jurors who heard the testimony in this case when I spoke with them after the verdict was, will there be changes? Will some of these supervising officers be fired or disciplined? Is what we saw normal for the Minneapolis Police Department and the BCA? How will this be prevented from happening again? A large amount of taxpayer dollars will go to Australia, but Minneapolis residents await the promised transformation. The jurors and the people of Minneapolis need and deserve answers." So in the wake of what was at the time the highest profile police shooting in living memory and a record $20 million payout to the family, what changed? In a word, nothing. Governor Walz's promised audit of the BCA never materialized. The Attorney General and Department of Public Safety convened a working group to make recommendations on how to reduce and investigate future police shootings. But that working group was stacked with law enforcement officers, and they did not make any substantive recommendations. There were no firings or prosecutions of the officers who lied under oath, and the police department and city council never released a comprehensive report outlining all of the contributing factors that led to Justine's death and what concrete policies were put in place to prevent future tragedies. Evidence-based recommendations developed and presented by CUAPD and other community groups were rejected or ignored. So within this context, George Floyd's death was not only understandable, but inevitable. We have a corrupt policing system that operates free of accountability or consequence. And our state and city leaders have failed at every turn to acknowledge the severity of this crisis or implement meaningful reforms. Until that changes, innocent citizens will continue to share George's fate. Thank you.
All right, we'll pass it to Christoph. Can you tell us what led up to you becoming a volunteer with Communities United Against Police Brutality, and what your experience has been since joining?
Absolutely. I started with CUAPB shortly after I went to, I think it was the first or second big protest there was outside the Police Federation. Bob K.K. Kroll must go, talking about the head of the police union. This is after George Floyd was killed, and I was seeing the reaction and the protest, and it felt to me a real reactionary kind of response with helicopters going overhead. And anybody who lives in Minneapolis knows what I'm talking about. And I felt like I wanted to get out there and do something, so I went to this protest and heard someone from CUAPD talk about how here's a group, Communities United Against Police Brutality, that meets every week, has working groups, is continuously trying to do some work, which is like, that's the itch I want to scratch. I don't just want to go to protests every once in a while to make myself feel better. I want to do some work. And I've learned a lot in the 2.5 months since I've been going to these CUAPD meetings. The thing I wanted to talk about quickly, my job is to be quick so we can get to the testimony from y'all, is what led up to the killing of George Floyd. What were the failures of our municipal government, the city council, and the mayor that left the way open after too many people have already been killed by Minneapolis police for George Floyd to have that same horrific fate. Lately, I've heard some folks from the council members' offices and from the mayor's offices say things like, we've tried everything. There are a few things they have not tried. More than a few. Chauvin, the officer who killed George Floyd, is, and this was in the paper, the Star Tribune, a week or two ago, is a warlord. And that's Minneapolis Police Department jargon. That's what they call him. He's a warlord. That means he's one of the cops who gets to say where other cops go for off-duty work. There's a big problem with off-duty work, and this is a problem that the city has been aware of for a long time. It's a problem that right now small business owners who, folks who have a liquor license and want to be going until bars close, are required to have off-duty cops be their bouncers. Derek Chauvin was one of the people who hired the off-duty cops, who put them in place, who got to say who, gets to work at this place, gets to work at this place. And one of the places he was putting people at said it felt like, he was strong-arming them. Felt like he was a gangster. They take cash money under the table. Okay, and this Derek Chauvin has the power to say, my buddy, gets to work here, but you don't. But you don't. This cop does, this cop doesn't. And that gives him a lot of power. Derek Chauvin was also, when he killed George Floyd, he had 18 complaints against him. He had several lawsuits against him. But the MPD thought, let's keep him on the force. The MPD thought, let's make him a training officer. So some of those cops who were with him, who inexcusably didn't stop him after 8 minutes of killing someone in broad daylight, some of them were training officers. They were fresh on the force. They were under him. They were learning from him how to be cops. Okay, and it's just mind-boggling and inexcusable to me. They make this man a training officer, They have these officers now who are probably gonna go to jail, probably gonna lose their jobs. And that was the kind of training that they received. And, right, there's no excuse for not intervening when you see what many of us saw with George Floyd. But one of the pieces that was going on is Chauvin's a warlord. He says who gets to get off-duty money, right? He's the boss. So they didn't, that's a big wall to intervening. That's a big wall to doing bystander intervention. It's a wall that could have been overcome if the city embraced bystander intervention training, which it had an opportunity to do. In fact, for years, EPIC, EPIC, is a bystander intervention training that has come to Police Chief Arredondo, that's come to the MPD and said, we'll offer this training for you. We'll give you a discount, right? And the MPD thought about it and thought about it and thought about it and said, no, thank you, after, right, months of kind of stringing them along. This is training that, and you hear it now, right? Every time someone gets killed by the cops, you hear, we need to get cops to stop other cops from doing this kind of stuff. This training is designed to actually accomplish this, and this training has been, right, shown, research shows that it works. It actually has cops role play, interrupting one another when they're doing something messed up. It has cops continually get training, not just a one-time thing, but a continual thing. It's proven. And CUAPB and other groups have come to Mayor Frey, come to the city council and said, we need this kind of training. And ultimately, they said no. So the blood is on their hands in a big way of that. Another measure CUAPB has championed and others is liability insurance. So doctors got insurance, right? If they mess up, their insurance goes up. They're made accountable in that way, lawyers too. When we're driving cars, we have insurance. You get in a car accident, your premium goes up. You get in a car accident, your premium goes up high enough, you can't drive anymore. The idea is, let's have cops have that insurance. They do something wrong, premium goes up, and they pay it, right? The city doesn't pay that increased premium. The union doesn't pay that increased premium. We have to have the cops pay out of pocket when they do something wrong. It's simple, and we do it in so many other professions where we aren't, right, paying people to have guns and paying people to go out and do this dangerous and often violent work. This liability insurance idea was floated with a petition with hundreds of signatures.
17,000 signatures, actually.
17,000 signatures to the city council. And they, again, hemmed and hawed and fought tooth and nail to make sure that this didn't happen. Ultimately, right, they made sure that the Minnesota courts got a look at it, and the courts ruled, city can't do this. The state legislature is going to have to do this. And then, right, the city said, oops, I guess we can't do the liability insurance. So now the fight is, after George Floyd, right, the fight has been to try and get the state legislature to do something like this, to have some liability insurance, to open up the possibility of cities to decide, we want our officers to have this kind of insurance. Now that bill was introduced by the Democratic House, right, after George Floyd was killed, but it ain't law yet, and it's a long, long, long way from being law, but at least it's been introduced. That's another thing that the city could have done, didn't do. The mechanism that's in place when an officer does some kind of misconduct, whether it's brutalizing somebody or something else, the mechanism that's in place for us to go to the city and say, hey, a cop did wrong by me, is called the OPCR. It's the Office of Police Conduct Review. This is another big problem that the city could have taken care of, and that CUAPB and other groups have been talking to the city about for years. With this one, it's been since 2012. In 2012, there was another office where you could go and you could file a complaint and you could get some assurance that that complaint was going to be heard and people were going to investigate that cop. It was secretly dismantled, that old Office of Accountability, and replaced with this OPCR by the Minneapolis Civil Rights Department, which is now under investigation by the Minnesota Civil Rights Department. It's George Floyd. Was dismantled by the person in charge there, Velma Corbel. CUAPB said, we gotta, we have to have a community look at this, right? A year after the OPCR came into being, the city council had said, we are gonna get people together, we're gonna have a public conference, we're gonna talk about how it's working. Came to a year later and said, hadn't been long enough. Let's do it next year. Came to next year, and they practically gaslit the public and said, we never said we were going to do it next year, right? We're not going to do it at all. still haven't had that kind of, let's get together and talk about how the OPCR is working. Here's how the OPCR is working. Since 2012, there have been between 2,000 and 3,000 complaints filed. Less than 100 of them have led to any discipline. Less than 100.
Wow, 13 now.
Less than 20, 13.
13. There's been 3,116 complaints. 13 have led to discipline. That is a 0.42% sustained and discipline rate. Seriously.
Preach.
0.2%, less than half of 1%. The national average for civilian oversight is 7 to 8%. So we are like the low end outliers. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Just had to throw it in, you know?
That's a good clarification. Less than 100, less than 20, 13, less than 0%. And every time Val McCorville, who put this system in place, has been up for, a re-election or reappointment, CUAPB and others have said, hey, look at this thing that has less than 1% effectiveness. Get rid of Val McCorville and get somebody else in there. And every single person on the city council today, every person on the city council, every mayor has said, no, Val McCorville's doing a great job. Every person on the city council today who says we need to defund the police, look again at their record. They are not friends of police accountability. And the OPCR is a big problem. I'll just say one more thing, because there's so many more details at our literature table back there, but Governor Waltz and the mayor and the city council often say the big problem is arbitration. Big problem that we need to do is hamstring the police union a little bit because they keep us from disciplining cops. Well, the fact is, they choose not to discipline their cops. Sometimes an arbitrator comes in and looks at how they've been disciplining, or more appropriately, not disciplining the cops systematically, right? It's an arbitrator's job to say, let's see if you're being fair. You singled out this officer here because he did something bad and somebody caught him, but you didn't do it to this officer, this officer, this officer, this officer. When they do it and nobody caught him, that's not fair, you can't discipline him. So it's up to, and COAPB has talked to the city council about this, it's up to the city to start disciplining consistently and to have what's called a discipline reset. Say from this day forward, we're not looking back at the precedent of how poorly we've done with police discipline in the past. From this day forward, we're doing a discipline reset there. Can't look at that for precedent. We're going to start actually using the discipline matrix we have, actually using the policy and procedures we have, actually doing progressive and consistent discipline of police. So of course we're going to have a problem with the police and their behavior if we don't discipline them consistently. We don't do what even the policy and procedure manuals that we give them to read say that we're going to do. Is right. You start with a write-up, you do this, and then you discipline this way. The list goes on and on and on, and there's more details at the literature table at the back, but there are a lot of ways that the city failed, and that's what led up to the killing of George Floyd.
So thank you, Christoph, for that background on that. And just to a few points to understand as we move forward, when Todd spoke, illustrated that that the situation with Justine is that it's very rare in that a cop is actually prosecuted. The ethnicity of the cop was important. The ethnicity of Justine is important. And I don't want to remove this from the conversation, so I'll bring it in. We do live in a state with some of the worst racial disparity in the country. Yet we very well, far between talk about it. We might see NPR as a very safe and comfortable place to see conversation, yet Kathy Werzer and a lot of hosts don't ever seem to touch on it. However, when they do, it seems to be in February, or it seems to be a very special, conversation about race. It's not just something that happens casually. That happens for folks of color like myself all the time. And then also introducing that what Christoph mentioned is that the system is not working. The system in place is not working. It's important to know that between George Floyd Square, attending multiple rallies, and then also speaking with constituents around Lowry Hill East, a lot of these people are not looking to go for re-election next year. It appears, from my understanding. And that has to do with folks that are running for city council, running for mayor. And the question is, what is the leadership going to look like going forward? Recently did a forum with David Bicking about, can the structure serve the people with right-minded folks in positions of leadership? And the answer was, Maybe not. Maybe the system's broken. So we're not here to say it totally is. We're not here to say that there's, this city is devoid of good leadership. It's the idea of what's going to work going forward, and what do people want to see working for them. So real quick before we get into testimonies, I just want to get like a 1 or 2 word answer from you. When I say the word police, what's the first words that come to your mind? Just raise your hand. Yeah.
Fear.
Yeah.
Scary.
Fear, scary, what else? Yeah.
Oppressive.
Oppressive. What else? Yeah.
Corruption.
Corruption.
Non-working street lights.
Say it again.
Non-working street lights.
Not working.
Street lights.
Okay, not working streetlights. What else? I'll take one more. Yeah.
Rude.
Rude. When I say the word whiteness, what are the first things that come to your mind? Go.
Violence.
Violence. What else?
Protected.
Protected.
Privilege.
Privilege. We had people, some you all were in sync on that one.
Silent.
Silent.
Dominant.
Dominant. So when we talk about police departments, white supremacy, racial disparity, economic disparity, the idea is that perhaps for these forums, we can reimagine what that looks like going forward, and then develop some kind of idea of what we want that to be going forward, because obviously this is not working. George Floyd is not in a vacuum. I grew up near 38th in Chicago for the entirety of my life, and I can tell you that situation happened very often, with cops coveting black bodies on that intersection. It also happened a lot at Shorty's and Wags on Nicollet, and I believe it was 38th. And then they beautified that intersection, right? And they were looking to do the same with Chicago and 38th. So we see what the city is kind of the trajectory of it is. Let's get into testimonies and people that have had a complaint, filed an official complaint with police. You can step to the stand here and speak. Tell us your experience, and we'll leave this open to you. If not, we can just go into people that have had experiences with the police. But first, we want to leave it open for people that have had filed official complaints with the police department. Anyone here?
And also, if I could real quick, I just want to remind you, we do have food. We do have food in the kitchen.
That's okay.
We do have food in the kitchen, lots of great food, actually. And so please help yourself walk in through that door over here and come out through that door over there. And the restrooms are in the hallway, but like I said, help yourself to something to eat. Don't just sit here. And this is, again, audience participation. We're not going to get very much testimony out of you all if you all just sit here and kind of look at us, because everybody in this room has had some type of experience in this whole matter, from the point of what led to George Floyd being killed to the aftermath. Everybody in this room has had some sort of experience that has value, and we want to capture that information. So please participate and step up.
It'll happen. I'm sure people will. So if people can quick tell us about their experience with the police, if you've ever had a run-in or anything like that. Yeah, you want to step to the mic real quick?
So I wanted to touch on something that I believe that you were speaking about. My experience with police primarily comes from underground music industry, sometimes referred to as rave culture or festival culture. When I moved to Minneapolis, it was obvious to me, and there was also an article in the Tribune about police being paid to be the off-duty officers at these events, which is what allowed them to happen in the first place, because they're after 2 a.m. So it's a very clear indication of corruption where these elite party groups have worked out a mechanism with the police in order to do something that they shouldn't need permission to do in the first place, to be clear. Like, politically, you are not free to dance. It is not covered under the Constitution as a freedom of expression. I'm not sure if people know this, but it's true. You can look it up. You don't need permission to dance. It's ridiculous. It's involved in cultural genocide. And as a raver and festival goer, I often have to deal with cops coming onto property unannounced with some bogus noise complaint. They won't take a decibel reading. And so this is my experience with them from a completely different perspective. Like, if you don't play their game, they will try to shut you down with anything that they possibly can, unconstitutionally as such. And that's kind of my primary experience. I haven't had a police officer violate my body or my person, I've never had them help me either, though.
So what has that done for the trust as you as just a citizen in this country going forward? Like, do you feel a certain way about seeing the police? Do you trust them in certain situations, or do you only not trust them in festival situations? What has that been for you down the road?
I never see a cop and feel safe. That's not a thing that happens for me. I don't see a police car and be like, oh, I feel better. That's never happened in my life. That's not been my experience as an American, as a white person in the Midwest. With all of my privilege, I've never been like, oh, I feel better now that cops are here. So,
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I just don't trust them at all. And honestly, if you look at a bigger picture when you talk about what this country does on an international level, I think that the harm against brown and black bodies that happens here in this country is terrible, but it's astronomical when you look at what we do as a country all over the world. And that thing about America and the military being the world police,
Yeah.
there's a lot of tie into that, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, appreciate it. Anybody else? We're going to get into the circumstances that led up to 38th in Chicago for George Floyd, but real quick, your testimonies on your experience with the police, even if it's been working with them in liaison in your neighborhood. It might have been a situation where nothing happened. What has your experience been with the police? Yeah, go ahead. Mike's over here.
And if you're in the doorway, please feel free to come on in. We've got plenty of space.
First, I'll have to breathe a bit that I didn't expect to share anything today. But an experience I had, so I've had run-ins or experienced just officers taking advantage of their power or position a few times. But last summer, I experienced that my partner and I were following instructions to get off the bike path and bike in the road because there was construction. We were going too slow for officers apparently coming up behind us. And once they caught up to us, they started yelling at us over their loudspeaker that we were in the road and that we needed to get out of the way. And as they caught up to us, my partner and I were both explaining to them that we were yelling at them, that we were following the signs that were clearly there on the road, for that we were not doing anything wrong. And they continued to harass us verbally and then swear and call my partner names. I'm just really shaken up thinking about it. It took like a good 2 weeks to figure out how to even file a complaint, to look up what office to go to downtown, which I had to talk to 3 different people about where to go. Once we got into the county building downtown, we were escorted from 3 different offices to finally get to the right office where we made the complaint. And it felt very much like a secret avenue of how to even do what I should be able to do. Like, inform that an officer who's supposed to be protecting people is harassing people, and then trying to call them out or hold them accountable was just very, very difficult. And I can't imagine, like, if you don't, I had to just know a lot of the right terms to look up to even find out how to do that. So that's just been sitting in my mind for a long time now, that just the process of holding them accountable for a normal, just everyday citizen is really difficult. And
Well, 2 things I want to ask you. You said you were shaking when just remembering it.
yeah,
Would you categorize that as trauma, or what would you call that?
yeah, sure, yeah. Sorry.
And then you say the word accountability at the end. What does accountability look like to you going forward? Because that's a huge word, I think, that we've been applying to the governor, the mayor, city council. It seems to be completely devoid of the cops. And in my experience, Arredondo is the only human body that's even expressed maybe a fiber of it. And I'm not quite sure even about that. But what does accountability look like to you in that situation going forward by the cops?
It would be some type of, I guess, restriction on the ability of what they get to do. And
Yeah.
and I did learn, I spoke with the liaison who at the office where you file the complaints. She explained that it would take, I'd hear, if my complaint didn't go forward, I'd hear about it in 3 months, because they were so backed up. They just had hundreds of cases of people filing complaints against police. And I assume that it didn't get dropped because I didn't hear, and it's been a year. I saw that the same officer, one of the two officers that was involved, I ran into him a few months ago leaving the hospital, and he guided me out of there and was very nice. And I just had I saw his face and knew instantly that you were that officer that I had. And what are you doing here? Why are you in this? Why are you at HCMC helping people, like being around a place where people need comfort and help, when I know that you're someone who will just yell at a pedestrian, a biker who's following the law, literally being told bike in the road, and then yelling at a biker for doing that. So accountability, that take a year off from interfacing with the public if you can't even handle a biker going a little too slow for you on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it also sounds like the capability, the potentiality of them being violent is something that's concerning as well. If you can smile at a hospital, and then yell at somebody on the road, I mean, it sounds very duplicitous or splitting in that sense. So yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Sure. Anybody else? Oh, wait.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask you, so you don't know the outcome of your incident, of your...
No, and I was told we wouldn't necessarily receive any notification of anything happening with that officer. Just that if they receive so many, it was like 6 or something complaints, then they might lose some pay or something. Like even the punishments that were described to us are very minimal, and yeah. So no, we didn't hear anything. I just assumed it went through and it was added to their jacket.
Okay. Anything else, Michelle? Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else have? Yeah.
Do you want me to go over there?
Can you go to the microphone and maybe speak for? Okay.
So we can capture the testimony.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have had many experiences with the police for many years, probably from my college years up until now, even in my job. We do have these experiences. We have to involve the police for people that are having issues themselves, so I have many experiences. There's one experience with a deaf person. The situation was... So this is from my college years. I was with a few friends, and a little drunk, emotional problems, things like that. And the police often don't know how to communicate with deaf people, will restrict you with your hands behind your back, which obviously, what are you going to do with that? You can't talk, you can't explain. It is just awful. They will restrict you against the ground, hands behind your back, in the cop car, no interpreters, don't provide any sort of means of communication, and you're just stuck there. So granted, that was back in college, many experiences with that. And I'm from all over the country, so I'm sorry they aren't all from here. But that unwillingness to provide an interpreter for somebody who is at any process of this, but especially if you're arrested, there are so many deaf people that have no idea that charges are filed against them. They don't know what's happening. Not all deaf people can write back and forth. Even if you have great English, that is still, it causes so much communication to base everything off of a written concordance back and forth. Many times deaf individuals are held in the court system without interpreters, are brought to jail and imprisoned without interpreters, and then are brought back and forth from court to prison and court to prison because they aren't adequately provided interpreters. This will happen until they finally just plead guilty. And it is not just, this is without actually knowing their side of the story, without ever being given a chance to tell it. So where I work, we work with victims. I'm a victim advocate, and we will go and we will try to help them navigate through the police system and the court system. And it is just, we've had so many of these instances where there's an emergency situation and you have to file a police report. Someone will try to say, so I'm sorry, when I am there as the advocate, we've waited for many, like 2 to 3 hours for an interpreter just to show up. While I'm there in the position of power, my friend is is outside. I finally told a friend of mine to come inside who was an interpreter, was not on the job, but just a friend of mine who's an interpreter to come into the police station to help. Boom, everything was taken care of. They told me there was no police officers in the room that we were waiting for. That's why we were sitting there waiting. It turns out that there were 3 of them waiting for us, and all it took was someone who could hear to figure that out. And this situation happens again and again and again. So,
Do you believe that ASL should be mandatory for police officers? If not for all, what percentage of police officers do you believe on the force should be fluent in ASL?
well, really, I believe there needs to be a certified interpreter. That is what we require, not for police officers to know sign language. You can't learn sign language in a short time. It takes years and years and years. So we would need a certified interpreter to come in. They also have neutrality as well.
Got it.
What about the neutrality?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Anything else you want to add?
No, that is it. That's
No,
it.
for sure.
Thank you. Oh, you know what? One more thing. While we're talking about deaf BIPOC folks, they have it worse. I want to make that clear that their experiences with police, it is worse. You can only imagine, obviously, but I just wanted to make sure I made that clear. They are often jailed without reason, without a chance to provide explanation, without potentially even having done anything. This is common.
Thank you so much for sharing.
And can I say thank you for the way that you have helped people in the community? I just want to say thank you to you.
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you so much.
So with that, I mean, a few more testimonies on your experience with the police, even if it's been working with them in tandem to create an event. This doesn't have to be necessarily negative experiences. We just want to hear about your experience with police, regardless of what it is. And it's not really to set a tone. The idea is, and this was asked to me earlier from press, what is the outcome of this forum that I envision? It's not about what any one person in here envisions. We're going to take this wherever it goes. The room is going to take this wherever this wants to go. So in the beginning, when I said, what do you think of when I say the word police, fear, scared, a lot of words that surrounded that came up. And then when I said whiteness, we talked about protected, privileged, and that going forward. If there's garnering that feel from this room, what other experiences have you had with cops throughout your lifetime? We'll take like 2 or 3 more. Yeah, go ahead. You go.
I'm an immigrant. I'm from India. So the first experience I had with authority was at TSA. I don't know if TSA comes under police or anything, but just the authority.
What
And
does that PSA mean? Just for people that don't know.
TSA.
What?
TSA at the airport.
Okay, got it.
So every time I flew out of Minneapolis, I know I would be racially profiled. Last year, my parents came. I make sure their point of entry was Chicago, not Minneapolis, because I've had multiple experiences where even if I had some spice or whatever, we were kind of racially profiled. And also, I think one morning we were going to Duluth with my friends, and 2 of them were African American. I blended in with my brothers and sisters. They did nothing, but they didn't even, I think we didn't even break any law, but we were called aside. So that was my first time experiencing just being pulled and called out for based on the color of my skin and color of the skin of the driver. So it was an experience also to understand for me as an immigrant the gravity of the situation and just how much needs to be spoken and what needs to be done. So thank you for doing this.
When you were in the car with your friends, what was like the feeling you got initially when you thought that it could have been racially motivated?
I had fear. I was like, do you guys have your license, everything? And they were kind of training me of saying like, it's okay, be calm, just answer the questions. But I was like, we didn't do anything, like after the fear, right? When you collect your thoughts and your process, I'm like, we didn't do anything. Why were we even stopped? And why
did they say that for any reason that they stopped you?
they were like, oh, you passed when you were, the light was yellow. I was like, no, it was green.
Did you get a ticket?
No, not a ticket.
Okay.
But they just questioned where we were going, what we were doing.
Yeah.
They asked what did I do and
Yeah.
where were we headed to and things like that.
Okay. Okay.
And you were a passenger in the car,
Yes, I was.
and they asked you where you were, they talked to you personally?
Yep, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they asked me my name and what I was doing.
Okay.
Just to kind of point out that that's improper, you know, that they had no business asking you anything as a passenger.
Oh, I
Thank you
didn't,
for
I
sharing.
didn't know
Yeah.
that. Thank
Appreciate
you.
Michelle, I want to ask you really quick because knowing your rights, and this has been like a big phrase thrown around, know your rights. Is it dangerous, or I shouldn't say is it dangerous because I kind of had my own experience with that. Throughout your experience and people that have come to see UAPB that know their rights and then explain that to the cops in the field, whereas we know their only power is in the field, has that exacerbated the circumstances, or has that worked in the favor of the citizens that said, hey, I know my rights, I don't need to roll this window all the way down, I don't need to, you need to tell me why you pulled me over? Has speaking legal jargon back to officers worked, or has that only exacerbated the situation?
You know, that's a great question, and it's a mixed bag. We do a lot of know your rights training around all over the Twin Cities, all over. I go to a lot of like alternative schools. Obviously, not right now with COVID and everything, but up to that point, we would be out at like food shelves and needle exchanges and schools and churches and everywhere we can, teaching people about their rights. But when we teach you about your rights, well, the thing that I've always talked about is you need to know your rights so you can make decisions, but you have to make decisions how you're going to exercise those rights and when and how. It's a very big difference between, you know, exercising your rights at 3 p.m. in the afternoon in a crowd where there's a lot of people around and can see, versus 3 a.m. and you're in an alley somewhere with 5 cops. And it also means a lot, you know, in our society about who is doing the exercising of their rights, as you know. And so, you know, it would be very foolhardy to just say, here's your rights, you know, now go do it. You have to make decisions about how to exercise your rights, but you cannot make those decisions unless you know your rights first. You know, otherwise we get, like a lot of people call our hotline and the cops will just come and start questioning them, and they say things that get them in trouble later because they didn't realize that they didn't have to say those things or answer those questions, and they didn't realize that there were other ways to respond to those questions. And so a lot of what we do is we don't necessarily tell people legal jargon and stuff like that. What we do is give people examples of ways you can get yourself out of that situation. And people, because they don't know their rights, they just start answering questions and stuff like that. And, you know, there are other ways to get yourself out of those situations. And doing that is, you know, that's the fundamentals of knowing your rights. Not just like having some like legal jargon you can run out there.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. It's a very different deal. And again, you have to make decisions, but you cannot make those decisions if you don't know what your rights are to start with.
Exactly. And I do want to leave it open for anybody that still wants to make testimony, but we'll move into the next kind of chapter of this. What were the circumstances that led up to the killing of George Floyd? What do you believe the circumstances were that led up to the killing of George Floyd? You don't have to step to the mic. You can just raise your hand and let us know if it's short, if it's a little longer, then step to the podium. What do you believe the circumstances were that led to the killing of George Floyd? And then there's really no right or wrong answers. It's just, you know, what do you believe the circumstances were? Assumption? Assumption on whose part?
On both parts, and mostly the officers.
Okay.
Of just assuming the situation and taking it in control with their own ideas. You
You said assumption on both ends?
Yeah, but mostly the officers.
What assumption might have been on Floyd's end?
It's just the assumption that they are there to hurt him, or that they are there to do wrong to him,
Mm-hmm.
and that even just the way that he had acted up to that point of giving them more reason to feel like he was doing something wrong.
Do you think George might have had the assumption that he wasn't going to die that day?
Sorry.
Do you think George assumed he was going to die that day the second that he got
Once
attacked by the cops? Because you saw the footage from Dragon Walk where he's just kind of walking around like this. You know, it didn't really look like somebody that was necessarily like, well, I'm going to die today. Do you think he assumed that the cops were going to kill him, or that they were just going to take him downtown? What do you think?
I think he would have assumed violence.
Assumed violence?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just from the way that they were acting, you know.
Okay. What else do you think were the circumstances leading up to the killing of George Floyd? We said assumptions. What else? And if you disagree or agree, you can sound off on that as well. That's what we're here for.
The war on drugs.
The war on drugs? What do you think the war on drugs had to do with the circumstances?
I mean, you mentioned race earlier, and ethnicity that plays a factor in it. At least from my experience.
Do you hold ethnicity synonymous with the war on drugs?
I think they go together because we look and see who the amount of statistics based on drug consumers,
Uh-huh.
based on ethnicity or race. African Americans, for example, are not consumers more than Caucasian people or whites, but yet they're incarcerated and they have more legal charges than Caucasian people.
So the war on drugs, you're saying, has been targeting people of color more than white folks?
Absolutely, and it's in the mentality of the police.
Yeah.
They're out there saying, this is what happens when you use drugs, kids.
Uh-huh.
I was out a couple of weeks downtown, and they're making fun of drug use, and they accuse me of using drugs.
Okay.
And they also make fun of mental illness as well.
Yeah.
Officers that are outright totally insensitive to that.
Yeah.
And the folks that they're interacting with can suffer from both.
Well, let me challenge you on this. Do you believe if, let's say there was a kid with the Southwest High School jacket stepping out of Broder's, and they called the cops and said, hey, this white kid had a fake 20. Do you think that white kid would have died that day?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
The militarization of policing.
The militarization of police? What about that?
Well, I mean, apparently, you know, the guy, Chauvin, was a trainer and had been trained in tactics, police tactics that are really based in military. But even then, military had code of conduct that they would not even use that in that instance.
Okay.
So
Can you just step to the mic real quick? Because I know some people are kind of like leaning in. It's just the nature of the room. I know. So you
Sorry,
said,
I'm a small lady with a small voice. So I was just saying militarization of police in the sense that somebody like Chauvin has been trained, and he was a trainer, which is unbelievable.
yeah.
Because it was a kind of a training situation.
Why is it unbelievable that he's a trainer?
Because he was a person that had multiple citations against him.
Okay.
I would not hold him out as, the best of the best. I
Yeah.
think even the police you talk to probably would not.
Yeah, he had already killed 1 or 2 people. Was that correct? Or
He's
shot
been
one?
involved with George Floyd, he's been involved in 3.
Okay, he's been involved in 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
So militarization. He's a trainer, which is unbelievable.
And they're trained to use tactics that are just very move to violence very quickly, which is not necessary. You can have policing, I believe, that does not do that. I have studied policing in other countries where they are trained to go to other methods first. So you do not need a war mentality for police. And in fact, as I was saying, the irony is that if you are in the military, you're actually trained to use force, probably, from what I've seen, in a much more highly accountable way than what somebody like Chauvin is. So that even in code, because I've studied the code of conduct of war, and even in that, you're not be allowed to use these tactics against civilians. So it's a twisted militarization of policing, and it's twisted because it should not be used in policing.
Okay, cool, thank you. So assumptions, militarization, war on drugs. We'll say one more. What is something else that led up to the killing of George Floyd? Yeah.
I'm gonna go up there.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah. Film yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I really think maybe not the rookies who were there, but I really think the police culture through their police federation understand, at least in the back of their mind, that they can step over a line. They don't have to watch themselves in the street because they know that that nothing is going to happen. They've seen the same court cases we have. They know that. They know their police federation president will back them up. They know all of his rhetoric. So I really don't think there's any check there. They're not thinking, man, am I going to get in trouble if I do this? I'm not saying that they go out hunting, although there are people who believe that, and some I think do, but I don't think there's any roadblock to them being violent from that perspective.
And so the idea is that, I remember a friend of mine stole a Snickers bar once, and he'd do it every time we go to this corner store. And then later on in college, somebody was like, well, you realize once you get away with it, your mind clicks in and is like, well, I can just keep doing this and doing this and doing this.
Yeah.
Until the day you get caught. Like psychologically, the more we get away with something, the more we do it. So with that mindset, with those rookies going in, Kyung and Thomas Lane, I believe, is that, do you think that they were already locked in? That they were like,
Well, I mean, they say that Chauvin was there to train, and I think he trained them.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what goes on, inside of the precinct where they talk about stuff over lunch or whatever, but I don't think they're getting people telling them you got to watch what you do, right?
Yeah.
They're influenced by that culture. And not only you talk about stealing Snickers bars, you don't get caught for that. Well, maybe next time I'll steal a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Maybe next time I'll steal some money.
Yeah.
So there's also that mentality where you just keep ratcheting it up.
Yeah.
Because I think kind of we're searching for where is the line. How
Well-
far can I take it before somebody pushes back?
Yeah, and I'll end on this with what you're saying. Somebody was turning left, northbound on Hennepin onto Lake, which is going the wrong way and a one-way. And I saw maybe half a dozen people just run out. Whoa, don't do that. However, when we see this situation, it's 8 minutes and 46 seconds of a person sitting there, when we talk about bystander training, and this idea of the rookie sitting there, watching this happen, and they could have stopped it. Of all the people there, they could have stopped it. Is there some complicity in that it's their job, they're watching this man, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which I've done the kneel at least half a dozen times at rallies. It is a long time. Is there some complicity in that being your job and doing nothing?
You mean the other police or the bystanders?
Yeah, the other police.
Oh, yeah, I believe so, but I mean, I think someone pointed out, I think Christoph, with Chauvin is a warlord. And all those guys know it, and they probably want those gigs from him because they want those good jobs. Plus, I mean, I don't know many police, but all of them have a very top-down mentality, right? They know who their leader is, and they know not to go against the chain of command.
Got it.
So if Chauvin is the lead on the case, I don't see them standing up. And I don't think there's any support within the department if they had tried to intervene.
Got it.
I think they're going to be out for doing that. They talk about it being broken, but I really think that's how police departments work.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with the circumstances that led up to the killing of George Floyd? What else was there? And if nobody else goes, then I have the next part that we'll get into. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, step up to the mic.
Sure.
I think there's certainly a lot of factors and a lot of things both decades ago, and like that day that made a difference. But I think impulsiveness almost, or fear, because initially they were called because of the counterfeit bill, correct?
Yeah.
And so, I think impulsive in the nature that I work at a food co-op on the front end. And we have pretty extensive training on how to handle situations like that when you think that a bill may be counterfeit,
Yeah.
whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
And so, impulsive in the sense that it was like a overreaction to like, wow, this is really bad, I'm going to call the police. I don't think we would ever do that, even if we knew that the bill was counterfeit.
Yeah.
Like, we don't assume that the person that's handing it to us is the person that is trying to, cause mischief, breaking the law, so forth. They may have got it down the street when they got some change back.
Yeah.
It's really dangerous in so many ways to assume that that person is wrongdoing. And
Yeah.
so the impulsiveness of that and the fear of that, or whatever motivated those feelings, is really where I think it triggered what happened that day.
Where's the food co-op that you work at?
Up in Northeast Minneapolis.
Northeast Minneapolis.
East Side Food Co-op.
East Side food. Okay, so have you ever been to 38th in Chicago, like at night at all, or?
I not on foot.
Okay.
I've driven by there many
Yeah.
a times, mainly to and from Sabathani Community Center.
Okay, have you ever been there like during the day
Absolutely.
on foot?
I can't recall a time, no.
Okay.
I don't live in that immediate neighborhood, so no.
Got it. So the thing I'll wrap up on is,
Yeah.
do you believe the climate of that neighborhood led up to, or just the conditions, the stratification, the negligence of the negligence of the city to that neighborhood
Sure.
led to that happening?
I absolutely think that is part of it.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when we talk about the circumstances that this led up to, I want to challenge all of you to really dig deep. Raise your hand if you live in Minneapolis or in Minnesota. Like if you live around, okay, cool. So we're all community members here, or at least most of us. The idea is that, okay, so 38th in Chicago, we designated that if this was outside of Rotors, it wouldn't pop off like that. 38th in Chicago has something to do with it. Derek Chauvin has something to do with it. Warlord. Police culture has something to do with it. Hey, I'm not going to touch on this. The militarization has something to do with it. The training, the mindset. Assumptions were made, which we can then say, why are these assumptions made? The legacy of that. Well, I'm going to 38th in Chicago. Oh, I got a black person I'm dealing with. Oh, they called me in for this 20. Something's being done wrong. Oh, so and so has a record. Let me just act with impunity and dehumanize this person. And then we go to the war on drugs, which is essentially, in my opinion, it's carte blanche for cops to pat you down, or you have an eighth on you, well, now we got to take you downtown. It can be a situation where you're getting a large punishment for a very small amount of something that meant nobody any harm. But I'll go further with it and challenge you on this, which leads us to kind of like the third part of this. And Michelle, rein me in if you want this to go somewhere else. The idea is that this happened here. This happened in Minnesota. This happened in your city. Terrence Franklin was murdered by the cops in 2013 in a basement. Ballistics showed that he was killed execution style. Philando was killed by a cop. We saw the aftermath on the video. Thurman Blevins was killed by a cop. We saw the video. He's running away. Yet we still have this culture of, dare I say, apathy that does not show up for that body of color until it's something so egregious that it looks like something from a torture chamber kneeling on somebody's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It took that for this city to show up. Before that, President City Council member Lisa Bender had offered up some police reform. Not until George Floyd. Before that, Mayor Fry had been sung as the leader of Black Lives Matter by Alundra Cano, one of the city council members. After that, people have a different perception of him. Governor Walz, before that, may have offered up, people thought he was doing great with COVID. After George Floyd, not so much. What we're seeing is a transformation of our own perception of ourselves, and I would say mostly of white people perceiving white people on what their complicity, their tacit complicity has been in the open modern day lynching of black bodies in this city. Now, I will tell you, in my opinion, as we said, context matters. If it's outside of Broders, it ain't gonna go down like that. If he's got a Southwest jacket and it's a white kid, I just can't imagine that would happen. And if it did happen like that, we go back to what you said, is that a rare instance might happen where justice is served. However, there is no justice being served, and I don't think the city really assumes, or the people here, us, assume so. You got a lot of windows being boarded up. Last night, it was terror in the streets. I got a text from somebody saying, hey, I heard 3 acquittals are gonna come through, city's gonna burn, get out of town. That's the worst news I've ever heard, like, in my life. Like, I mean, I've probably heard worse, but that's the level of fear that we're operating at in this city. So here's my challenge to everybody right now. And I want you to raise your hand, I want you to actively participate with this, or if you're not, just listen. You have a governor, you have a mayor, you have a chief of police, you have the president of the Minneapolis Federation of Police, Bob Kroll, and then you have the city council. President of the city council is a pretty powerful person, can do a lot of things on their own right now. They wouldn't lend that information to you. That information has not been lent to you, if not through CUAPB. The mayor can do something right now. That information is not, those powers have not been acted upon to decrease the power of the police. So, we talked about this person Velma being in power for years. Gosh darn it, we want to change now. And city council said, hey, we're going to think about it. We'll get back to you next year. I would think that everybody would say no if I asked the question, do we have another George Floyd to give up? So if we're talking about change right now, we're talking about an election year coming up, how can we reimagine systems in our city? How can we reimagine holding police accountable? How can we reimagine electing people that go into office next year? What are some solutions that you believe could make change within the next year? Raise your hand. Take your time. It's okay.
I mean, for me, I'm speaking for myself, to actually not ignore or be complacent.
What does ignoring look like?
Ignoring looks like doing nothing.
Okay.
Because I benefit from how the system is.
Yeah.
I have.
How do you benefit?
I haven't done much. I benefit by the way I'm treated by police.
Okay.
By the way I'm treated by others.
Mm-hmm.
And how I show up in public spaces.
And why is that?
And private spaces. I think it's because of white supremacy.
Okay.
And so therefore, I haven't had a lot of motivation in the past to actually try to advocate or be an ally or supporter for other folks out there who aren't like me.
Yeah, I mean, if you benefit from it, then it's like, well, why would I want to change it, right?
Essentially, that's how I see it, yeah.
But does it make you change your mind when you see other people not benefiting from it and more so getting killed by it?
Absolutely.
Okay. What else? Yeah.
Two things. One is, I think that if there's going to be a requirement that off-duty officers be hired by businesses, that should not be run by somebody on the force. I think the Federation is going to run it. The Federation should have a civilian running it, so that there's not that warlord mentality. And I think also the city should be more, the department needs to be more careful in who it uses as training officers. There was a pretty decent article in American Sociological Review that found that the attitude of the person who trains you in has a big impact on how you conduct yourself in basically the record of discipline that you build up after that. If you're with somebody who does it the right way, you're less likely to get it. If you're with a thumper or you're with a chauvin,
Yeah.
you're gonna follow their lead.
With what you just said, would that mean that you'd have to reset the entire culture of police department and maybe even change the word police in it?
I don't know that that in and itself would. I think what you would have to do is look for people that don't have a bad disciplinary record. And you could do it without a total reset. The total reset is obviously better.
Yeah. Okay, good enough. Anybody else, like a one-year solution? Yeah.
I don't want to endorse the the lesser of two evil solution, but there are some proposals that state Democrats have made that would be an improvement on the situation, and they've been unable to proceed with that because Senate Republicans have blocked it at every turn. So if you're talking about in the next year, flipping the Minnesota Senate is actually a big deal. I don't think there's any state senators or state representatives in the Minneapolis area that are not DFL already, but if you have the ability to volunteer time or money to outstate races to try and flip the Senate, that is a meaningful difference that would allow us to try and make some progress on state level legislation.
And Faith in Minnesota is targeting 8 Senate district races where there are currently Republicans, including the worst guy in the whole state. I'm lucky because I get to call his constituents. Warren Lemmer, who heads the Senate Judiciary and Criminal Justice Committee, he's blocked meaningful police reform. He's blocked gun control and so on.
Let me problematize this for both of y'all real quick. Anybody else thinking the same way? So this George Floyd happened on the watch of Walz, Fry, Bender, who are all Democrats, I believe. What's stopping me from saying, well, get them out of here? I don't want them here.
I'm not saying don't.
No. I'm just I'm like, I hear what you're saying, like quick reform, but it's also like, is there something that's got to change in the Democrats too?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. What? Somebody else? Yeah.
Well, I think we really need, to get into the whole, finding good candidates. We don't have very good skills at finding good candidates as a party, as a Democratic Party. I don't know what we go on, but, the person runs and they can say a few of the right things and they're in. But now we've got really heavier questions to ask.
Do you find yourself being more invested as a voter now than before?
Absolutely, but that's the frustrating part. How do you find out? How did somebody say they didn't think people were running for re-election? Did one of the speakers?
That's my understanding. So I've attended several community meetings at George Floyd Square. They're at 8 a.m. or 7 p.m. Everybody is welcome. I suggest everybody go to those, get an understanding of what's happening in an autonomous zone that could be under fire very quick, and that is going to set the tone for the rest of your community, the rest of this city. It's going to absolutely reverberate through the streets. And their understanding in speaking with certain city council members, they ain't coming back. They're tired. Their understanding from working with the mayor, they ain't coming back. And can pivot like Paletti, get into hedge funds, make more money, not have to talk to folks. That's not sarcasm. That's just that's the reality.
I feel like this. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. You know what I mean? Get to stepping. I'm glad to see it all.
Yeah.
Okay?
And it shows you the climate because Paletti pivoted, made money, came back, and then didn't even go through the first round. And then some people are saying that some city council members are a little bit tired. And that's just what I'm hearing from word on the street. That being said, that next election year is going to be huge, right? Tomorrow, next year, for all of those positions. Yeah.
Just wanted to mention for any of you who are interested in the legislative races.
Yeah.
Minnesota Second Chance Coalition has put together a questionnaire on a broad array of issues from police reform to prison probation reform, and it's online, and a surprising number of incumbents, including DFLers, my DFLers, haven't answered it, but that'll give you a clue as to what the people who are seeking your vote are thinking.
Minnesota Second Chance Coalition. Yes. You had your hand raised?
Yeah, I did. One of the things I wanted to say is that this is bigger than any one candidate or any one party. It's a systemic issue that's at the root bad.
Yeah.
And so what happens in our legislative process, sometimes we will have the House be Democratic and the Senate be Republican, and then you've got this war that you can't change anything because you can't get people to agree.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the whole body.
Yeah.
And the wheels in this system turn really slow. So
Absolutely.
one spoke at a time, you can't, so you want to have an ear that somebody's going to listen to what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that you can make a difference. But this is not going to be a quick fix process overnight.
Why not?
Because you got to get the whole budget. You got if we can have all of Democrats say on both sides, we might be able to push that faster.
Yeah.
But then there's the power of why are people in the office in the first place?
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's not because they want to represent our interests. They're representing their own interests or representing greed or whatever else they're representing, but it's not us.
Absolutely.
So we got to get people that want to represent us.
Yeah.
Regardless of what party they belong.
And I would say that it kind of, does it kind of start with this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, just to break the fourth wall here, when Rodney King happened, Los Angeles did the Christopher Commission. George Floyd happens, which I would say, you know, I mean, it, not to compare, but it the same, let's say they're the same thing. You should have a commission after that as well. But yet there is no Floyd Commission at all for what happened. But yet here we are as the people trying to make it happen. So I agree with you. But it also sounds like there should be, you know, maybe some elected officials here as well that want to listen. Yeah.
Can I ask you, what did the Christopher Commission do? Because Los Angeles police are just as bad.
They are. And I'll challenge you on this. It's one thing. The Los Angeles Police Department is pretty bad. They're horrible. And Michelle could correct me on where they land on like the most lethal level. The idea is that they were vetted from top to bottom with the Christopher Commission. And what else did the Christopher Commission
And it
do?
came out with several recommendations for policy changes. It required a change in the way that they educated cops. It could change a lot of the conditions of certain neighborhoods in the city. There were some things that came out of it. It slid backwards since then, and you're right. I mean, the LAPD, god awful, right? It's hard to say, you know, because it's like, you know, MPD, pretty damn awful. I'm from New Orleans, NLPD, real awful, right? I mean, you from New Orleans,
Yep,
you know, like,
yep.
so, you know, it's not like we don't need to have a contest, like, who's the worst, you know? You know, it's like, you know, race to the bottom, right? But at the same time, you know, there have to be some things that change. Now, one of the things that, you know, I've been thinking about sitting here is like this, a couple of thoughts. One is that there is a whole body of people, city council members, I think the mayor, the governor, that really think they can put this genie back in the bottle. A lot of legislators, they really are convinced they can put this genie back in the bottle. Now, like I said, I've been doing this work for a long time, about 33, 34 years now, and I had never seen in the time that I've done this work, people burn down a police precinct. I'd never seen that. Never happened in my work. That to me was a real symbol. It was a real thing that the community was trying to say, you know, we're done, right? And yet, what I see happening is these council members and these other elected officials all trying to figure out how to put the genie back in the bottle. And it's up to us, in my opinion, to let them know that the genie ain't going back in the bottle.
Now, when you say put the genie back in the bottle, do you mean quell the rage and anger of the city?
Exactly, and not really have to change anything. And part of the reason I think that they think that way is because change for them is scary. The reason it's scary is because and I believe the reason police brutality exists and continues to exist on and on and on after all these incidents is because it's actually functional for some people. You know, in other words, like, it's not an anomaly. It's not like, well, you've got these road cops. Like one of the things, CUAPB and myself for sure, do not believe in this concept of like bad apples and good apples or whatever it is, right? it's a bad system because it validates the conduct, it allows it to continue, and it doesn't do anything to stop it, you know? And so when I think about like the way that the city leadership and even the state leadership has responded to this, they're very much acting like they hope things go back to the way they were,
Yeah.
you know? I don't see them being open to like really making those changes happen. There's a whole hell of a lot of stuff they could have done long before this. They never did it. I don't want to take up too much time because I realize I'm taking up a lot of space here and I don't want to. But now they look like they're just hoping it all goes back like it was, you know? And I see Ronnie's got her hand up over there.
Well, because I wanted to just kind of add to what you're saying, Michelle, in terms of the George Floyd touched the hearts of a lot of people. And we were all inspired to do something different. The other side was inspired to bring us back to a fear against one another, to change the narrative.
Yeah.
So now we've got a group of people, a lot of white people, we're afraid of all these black people, and then they're talking about black on black crime, all these other things. Now we gotta be afraid of them. They are this way and that way. So now we got the pushback. When we were in a spot, in a moment where we can see the humanity in the black man and what was happening, they're trying to change the narrative.
Yeah.
And make the fear on the other side, that you gotta be afraid of them.
Yeah.
And so that perpetuates this problem, and then you got those people hearing on both ends, oh, we gotta protect citizens against those people. And that's a problem.
Well, and I also don't think, again, I did this in a theater workshop once. We said, racism occurs today. What could we have done yesterday to stop it? Okay, well, what could we have done a year ago to stop it? 10 years. How about 100 years? And we keep walking down the ladder. And what happened to George Floyd is emblematic of what this country has been about. When white folks had slaves, what they did was they brutalized the body of one black slave to show everybody else, hey, this is what happens when you step out. So now everybody else gets this trauma and this instilled fear. Well, I can't step out. That's going to happen to me. Now, you keep continually doing that down the line. Not only does it inform black folks, say, that if you do this, we're going to kill you. It also informs white folks watching from afar, oh, goodness, savages on 38th in Chicago. It's nothing but crime. And that narrative traveled with me, going to Stillwater to do a peaceful protest, going to Woodbury to do a peaceful protest. And this is going to sound wild to you. Woodbury and Stillwater, pretty racist, pretty fragile. It happened at Levin Park in Uptown. I did a peaceful protest in Levin Park. It was the most basic, I'm talking elementary march you could have done. It was great. And then we met up at the park and had a peaceful conversation. Some white folks approached me afterwards, and you can tell when somebody's in fight or flight mode. You can really tell, like white knuckling it. There's a little bit of a tick. And they approached me and they said, when we heard about this coming here, which off the bat, that language for me was red alert. And they said when we heard about this coming here, I was really upset, and I was going to try to shut it down. We didn't want this to happen here, but you did a great job, and you're welcome to come back here anytime you want to have a conversation. So, but now, that's touching on what you're saying. My presence, or even saying Black Lives Matter solidarity, 5 days after Jacob Blake, we're gonna march and talk about it. That's all it is. That presentation alone scared the life out of some white folks in Levin Park. So that disparity right there alone, that says a lot. That says there's a lot of work to do.
And none of them are racist either. But this irrational fear is what drives this. And unfortunately, politically, that's where we are. Like, we're so polarized as a country, I don't know if we can really, I'll be optimistic and say, I hope we can recover from this. Because it doesn't matter who wins the election. The genie, as you said, has been let out of the bottle.
Yeah.
People have felt empowered over the past few years to say things that they never would have said before.
Yeah.
Because now they feel that they have some political capital and they have a group, a team, and a posse. The difference between the kid at Southwest High School's experience with the police and George Floyd, or another teenager man, or a black female, or a black child, is black bodies are not respected. They never have been. Black people were property. If I want to discard my property, if I want to take these shoes and throw them in the trash, I can do that because I bought them. And we still have that, and that is so prevalent in society that when people saw the inhumanity of George Floyd, I was like, well, it's about damn time.
Yeah.
Because I can think of 100 incidents of people since George Floyd has been there. We have over 40 people, black males that have been killed by the police in this country since George Floyd. So when you, like me, I'm getting a little animated right now because, you know, it's exhausting. You know, when I leave my house every day, I say my prayer that I make it back home that night. I'm a professional person. I have a great position, great salary, beautiful wife, home, all of that stuff. We are God-fearing people. We pay our taxes. We don't break laws. We don't commit crimes. If the police see me in a car, that is not what they're going to see. They're going to see a black man in a car. And that in and of itself is what produces, I think somebody said, angst or something. White police officers demonstrate the ability to not shoot white people every day.
They did it in Bloomington recently, yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, this is, and now when you protest and you exert your right, if it's Black Lives Matter or something like that, now they're rioters. They're not even protesters anymore. Like, this language is so fiery and divisive, it is absolutely ridiculous. However, we can have a bunch of henchmen with their AR-15s and automatic weapons go into the Michigan House where the governor is, armed, and they're called patriots.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That is the issue. Is there's humanity for some people and humanity for not.
And it's interesting you say all of those things without really mentioning police too much. What it sounded like I heard from you was how white people perceive black folks, and with no respect perceiving us as property. That legacy, it goes up to today. And I think Nakima pointed this out. The 3 black men that were hung in Duluth in June 14, 1920, the white folks that hung them had kids. Those kids had kids. Those kids had kids that are now part of the law enforcement in Duluth. That's a legacy. That goes down the line. That doesn't just disappear. So with that being said, this experience in Levin Park, we said in the beginning, what do you think when you see police? Fear, scared, whiteness, protected, privileged. When these white folks approached me in a perfect day in summer, and I stood there, I felt scared a little bit. I felt fear. And them illustrating me as, hey, you're welcome here, reminded me of the signs that I believe a group of white women made called All Are Welcome Here. And it's this narrative of, you're welcome here. My property. I welcome you here, not the other way around. So going forward, my challenge to everybody here, because we're going to do 4 more of these, and that there will be some compilation of video made out of it, but the idea is that going forward, what is it that we have to do? We hear, we're going to dismantle the police department. What else do we need to dismantle? And don't answer that right now. But like in your own mindset, your day-to-day, what else do we need to dismantle going forward with our personal lives, with our ethnicity, with our social identity? Do we have some dismantling we need to do? Do we have some things that we need to check? Do we have some other folks that need to come to the next forum? Really, this is not going to be the same forum for the next 4. The idea is to let this conversation grow. We're not going to get any hard answers today, but you might find a few short-term ones. You're not going to solve the city's problems like off of one conversation, but you're going to start making direction towards it, right? As opposed to sitting at home and maybe watching, whatever's on the top 10 in the U.S. on Netflix. So the idea is take what we talked about today, mull that over. Yo, we got some homework. And I am not omitted from this conversation at all. Not in any way or form. So take what we talked about today, think about some things that you may have to dismantle or reconstruct or reimagine. Gonna come back next Friday, discuss that. The challenge is to invite more folks to this space, and that it will be in the park. Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing quick you're talking about going back to the new normal and the third precinct. I'm from Seward, and the city council will be voting before this next meeting next Friday.
Didn't they vote today?
I thought they were voting today. I thought
They voted again, they voted to postpone it.
Oh, thank you, yes.
Oh.
See, okay, we can't have any damn changes, but we can reinstitute the third precinct, which is disgusting. You know, what a slap in the face to the community.
They postponed it partly because it looks really bad to sign a 3-year lease when they're planning to abolish the police in the next year.
I feel like I stepped on
that they put out that they never intended. All of a sudden, it doesn't look so good.
Yeah.
That's not a good look. It's not a good look.
And there will be, Seward Police Abolition is doing an event at this space on Wednesday from 5 to 8, 2633 Minnewaha. So if anybody is willing to, contact city council members and get their city council members on board.
Do you have some written information, or could you have it on Facebook? Is this a big
Yeah, on
event?
Facebook. There's a
Yeah,
police
and
abolition.
make sure and tag CYTV so I can get that out there, you know?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I just want, on that particular situation, I thought that Cam Gordon's suggestions, at least to me, seemed pretty reasonable, and they would require some real change, and I'm fogging up my own glasses here, would require some real changes in the way that the police interface with the community, the way we would think about a precinct. And I was just wondering what you thought about those. And I am just wondering why the other council members did not rally around Cam Gordon's suggestions that came from the community, right? Like, he did the work of going to hear the community, but nobody's supporting him.
What did Cam Gordon suggest?
One of the suggestions was to not call it a precinct, but to call it a community safety center or something like that.
Yeah.
That would then also have community meeting space.
Yeah.
So that they're trying, the idea would be that police need to be embedded in the community, right? So like the woman who had the bicycle incident, you had the ability to be coming in and out of the precinct to do your community meetings. You might run into the guys, they might have to face you for your behavior, right?
Yeah.
So that would be one thing, I'm guessing, I'm assuming. And then the other thing is that he was saying that before the construction began or before they moved in, they would have to have in place a reconciliation process for that precinct and its community.
What would that reconciliation process look like?
I don't know, but I think it would be something like, having to have community say a little bit like this, how they feel about police there and have police in the room and have to hear it at the very least. But I thought some of those suggestions are reasonable and actual change in the way that we understand policing. And I don't know why other city council members would not back up the community, not just Cam Gordon, but back up the community and what they were saying they wanted.
Well, it does did you hear what Cam Gordon, some of those suggestions from Cam Gordon?
Oh, yeah, I was in the meetings with Cam.
And people still weren't satisfied?
Well, I think the couple meetings that Cam, I don't want to take up too much space, but the couple meetings that was with Cam were pretty hostile because Cam had invited police officers to them, so there was a lot of pushback immediately, saying like, why are we spending so much money on a new precinct when there's community members who are organizations for violence prevention programs and things like that. That have to fight tooth and nail for every cent that they get. So I think, I don't know, I like some of the suggestions that Cam made. I would love to see actual written down commitments as opposed to, well, let's fund the precinct and then we'll start this reimagining process.
Yeah. Let's give them the money and then figure it out. And that sounds like two useful things to get after. Yeah.
No, I just want to kind of throw, and by the way, I do like that idea of that reconciliation thing, but only if you run it.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, but in terms of like short-term stuff that people could be doing, there was kind of this whole thing, the city council came out and, frankly illegally because they violated the open meeting laws by coming out there at that thing and saying, we're gonna dismantle the police, we're gonna defund the police. And it kept rolling back, and now it's like we're gonna have a year-long conversation, which hasn't started yet. It's been a quarter of a year already,
Yeah.
So when the hell are we gonna get started? And so, one of the things that the city council could do right now that I think would help a lot is this. The city council actually has the power in the charter amendment to make certain technical changes without the charter commission's permission. There is a provision in the charter that requires us to fund the police at a minimum level of 0.0017 times the population. There is no reason to have that kind of an operational detail in the city charter. It simply doesn't belong. It was some crap that got put in there in the 60s by the Police Federation back then. It shouldn't have ever been in there. We should get rid of it now. What it would do is it would allow us to have flexible funding. Now, the other, pair that with a productivity study that was done on the police that shows that in the Minneapolis police, 60% of their activities are self-generated. Most police professional agencies, and professional groups say that for patrol officers, only 40% of their activities should be, sort of self-generated, watching for crime and this and that kind of stuff, right? Minneapolis, it's greater than 60%. What that's telling me is that they're only doing 40% of the freaking job, and the 60% of it, they're pissing around looking for people to bother. Okay? So what I'd say is this. I think it means that we could actually get rid of about, 60% of cops. Just saying. Looking at their own numbers, their own productivity study and things like that. We could deeply reduce the number of police, use that funding to direct it toward alternative providers, alternative responders. We should never have a police officer respond to a mental health crisis call. Never. In this city, should that happen. That is what has led to the deaths of many people, including Travis Jordan on the north side. We've had several people killed by police who were in the throes of a mental health crisis. Never should they be the responders. Why are they responders for drug overdoses? That's a medical emergency, not a cop, not a thing. Why are they responders to homelessness? That's a social service issue. So in my opinion, I think one of the things that we could do quickly, and I've been talking about this with council members, is get the cops the hell out of the business of things they don't need to be in the business of. All these things that you put them into, they are applying a law enforcement lens to. And these things don't need a law enforcement lens. So right out of the gate, if there was willingness on the part of the city council, the mayor, frankly, I wouldn't have had to tell them that idea. They would have had it on their own. Or even if we tell them maybe they're not that smart, I don't know. We give them the idea, right? Now act on it. I don't see them moving anywhere fast on any of this stuff. So again, to me, it's a lot of kind of gaslighting.
But you're saying they have agency to do something right now?
Oh yeah, they could. They could do this. What Dave knows about it, how the charter amendments get changed, how the charter gets changed.
Oh.
And the city council could do it by a unanimous vote, right?
Okay, and somebody had their hand up before you started speaking. Yes, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, why are we so focused on the third precinct? Why does the city, they don't even need a third precinct. Michelle brought that point up. If they're gonna get, was it 60%?
Yeah, I think they could cut the cops by at least half.
Third precinct didn't even respond to one of our cases. Took them a half an hour to go across the street. Half an hour.
Mm.
Come on, let's just say get rid of it, period.
Yeah, there was a kid that was getting followed by a guy with a gun. A high school student was getting followed by some crazy ass white guy with a gun. Took him a half an hour and like 14 phone calls to even go across the street. Turned out that the crazy guy with the gun was one of their off-duty cops, not in uniform.
Wow.
But they didn't know that.
1 second, David.
Yeah, I think, when you ask about what can be done in the next year, the thing is, there are so many things that could be done to just simply run a police department like you run other agencies of the city, not wildly out of control, not as wildly racist. We have had suggestions we've been putting out for decades of concrete things that could be done right now. And the only thing lacking, they can't point at the union, they can't point at state laws. These are all things they can do right now. The only thing lacking is the will. And I want to point people to the literature there. There's one for like statewide and county and municipal, and there's one just for Minneapolis listing some of these things. But the problem is the will. And you know, it's the system, it's not so much the people in it. It doesn't matter hardly who we elect as a city council, because a lot of the people ran on a platform of get the police under control. And the instant they're in office, they say, oh, we can't do anything. And they revert right back to the status quo. A status quo which is comfortable for a lot of people, but also extremely profitable for a small number of people.
Yeah.
And as long as you have those pressures coming at them, they don't want to challenge anything. They have to feel more pressure from us than they do from the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Council and all those folks who really set the parameters of what the police should do to push crime into one neighborhood and not in another neighborhood, to control who is allowed downtown and who isn't. All of those things come from the top, and we need to, you know, I think we have a window with this to put enough pressure on and we need to have that narrative. We need to know what it is that they could do.
Yeah.
And to challenge them and say, you are perfectly capable of doing this right now. Philippe Cunningham came out in the paper or something and said, we have tried everything. And he's tried zero. Total bullshit, and he knows it. They have tried nothing.
Okay.
And they want to go back to that status quo. So.
And you said something earlier about you ran for city council.
Yeah, a long time ago.
A long time ago, but you said that even though you lost, even though you didn't get the seat, you still wanted the person that wanted to know. They had to wake up in the morning knowing that, you know, there was going to be action at the doorstep. Right. That they were going to be held accountable. Yeah. And so when we talk about a window, again, this is the challenge to everybody because we have to wrap up. We're coming up to 8 p.m. here, and not to put a time limit on it, but we just, you know, these conversations could go. I've been doing forums for the past 17 years on substance abuse, sexual assault, racism, sexism, and transphobia, and we could go forever. But the idea is to take this content and bring it into your life and keep that moving forward. That being said, we come back to this word of accountability. We want them to feel they have to have some sense of accountability. And I think in the next one, we'll have to talk about what does accountability look like? What does that feel like? What is that sense of, what is accountability when you get pulled over by a cop? You know, maybe they're going to say, hey, are you okay first? As opposed to, do you know I pulled you over? You know, they're trying to get you to incriminate yourself. So, but that being said, there's a lot to speak on about that. And then also I think the other part is the money that's involved with it. And we can talk about that more down the road. I think it's the Minnesota Foundation or the Minneapolis Foundation. But reimagine what these entities look like. And then also, just personally, I'll say this. I mean, seats is open next year. Any one of y'all can run. Any one of y'all can run. City council, mayor. I just got through talking to somebody on the park board that was like, yeah, sure, mayor, why not? I'm into it. Why not? So, that being said, like, really consider that. Like, consider your agency in all of this. And a true inspiration to me has been watching a lot of leaders like David and Michelle, Nakima, Raisha, Catrice, that have been acting upon this agency for decades, for years. So really find out what that means to you, what your lane is, what your space is going to be. And we will most definitely see you at the next forum next week. And really come forward next week with what accountability means to you. And there's a lot of paperwork up there that's going to give you more information on next week's forum, and bring somebody, okay? Yeah. We'll see you next week.
Yes, thank you all for being here. Thank you so much. And by the way, don't come so shy next week, you know? Let's hear what you have to say. Next week we're going to talk a little bit more about the response of the police and fire in the immediate aftermath of George Floyd. We're going to have people who are affected by the poor decision making and the lack of action on the parts of those folks. And we're also going to try to bring in some element of talking about what role white supremacists have played in this whole matter. So come and also, but that's what we're going to introduce. but it doesn't limit what you can talk about. So please feel free to be part of that conversation and bring in any element you want to discuss. And y'all, thank you. And I think we have a lot